The House Privileges and Elections Committee voted 18-1 for the so-called BL Fairfax 12 plan, the one legal counsel feels has the best chance of standing up in the courts. The plan is at least 23% off the ideal mathematical mark, but delegates feel the courts would prefer they preserve city and county boundaries.
The courts will consider the communities of interest, the geographical outlines, and other considerations other than the exact mathematical differences.
Earlier plans gave Henrico an extra delegate to be shared with Charles City, Goochland, and New Kent. When those plans were scrapped, committeeman Bob Ball abstained from the vote.
I'm going to still study it and talk to some of the committees and see if anything else can be worked out to make it more equitable in this area. If it can't, I'll just live with it.
The plan does set up a Henrico-Chesterfield floater seat, but that would abolish the Richmond-Henrico floater seat, and that has city delegates upset. They're going to lose one of their 5 seats anyway because of a loss in population and had hoped to retain the floater. So the BL, or Brotherly Love plan, will get less than a warm reception when it comes up on the House floor. In the words of local legislators, the ball game's a long way from over, and they're not going to give up till it's finished. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The House of Delegates finally approved their Easter Bunny redistricting plan, so-called because the 29th District resembles a rabbit, and certainly not because of the speed with which it was approved. The 87-11 vote left many delegates unsatisfied because most feel it's the best plan they could come up with as a whole. Locally, the plan eliminates one Richmond delegate as well as its floater seat with Henrico. That county keeps its 3 delegates and would share a floater with a district composed of Caroline, Hanover, and Spotsylvania counties. Chesterfield would be combined with Powhatan and gain a delegate in the process. The House and Senate passed Governor Dalton's bills designed to get Virginia into the coal exporting business. Opponents charge it's a move toward socialism as the state takes over business usually reserved for private interests. And the bill which has the most direct effect on Virginians, a measure limiting credit card interest rates to 18% per year, was also passed by both chambers. It's a Band-Aid bill closing a loophole lawmakers unwittingly created during their regular session. Henrico Senator Bill Parkerson said it taught them a good lesson, that you have to know what you're doing before you change the state code. Still on the Assembly docket is congressional reapportionment, as the state's 10 districts are carved to reflect population shifts of the 70s. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The Senate completed work on the Assembly's own redistricting by approving the House of Delegates plan 29-9. Speaking against the measure was Republican Ray Garland, who argued the increasing size of some districts makes it more difficult for challenges to seats now held by Democrats.
When you, as a member of the House of Delegates, try to represent 180,000 people in a county like Henrico, that's extremely difficult. If you're not a member and you want to campaign for election, again, it's even more difficult. And when you go beyond that to that monstrous district of Hanover, Caroline, Spotsylvania, and Henrico, which is almost 300,000 people, and you're operating in 2 media markets, it's just a very inefficient arrangement.
As the legislators moved on to congressional reapportionment, several protests surfaced. Hanover's Elmo Cross was disturbed by one plan which would move his constituents out of the 7th District.
We have been there for the last 10 years. We feel comfortable in the 7th. We have a home in the 7th, and we desire to remain in the 7th Congressional District.
Of course, moving Hanover out of the 7th would also prevent the senator from running for the seat of Representative J. Kenneth Robinson, a motive Cross insists is not tied to his protest.
Does this plan have anything to do with your possible future political aspirations?
No, sir. I'm very happy to remain in the Senate of Virginia, and I hope it'll be the pleasure to be re-elected to the Senate of Virginia.
But the committees charged with changing Virginia's 10 districts just couldn't come to terms by noon, and both House and Senate majority leaders agreed to recess at 1:10 p.m. The Assembly will return on the 29th to finish their congressional plan and tie up any loose ends which may result from their action.
By the way, the decision to recess hours earlier than had been planned was largely influenced by Wilford Shoemaker. He's the manager of a local motel who told 50 of the legislators they had to be out of their rooms by 3:30 or pay for another day.
Quoting scripture, Senate Majority Leader Hunter Andrews said, "There's simply no room at the end." Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Senator John Warner is spending time this week interviewing candidates and people who can suggest candidates for 3 federal judgeships, U.S. attorneys and U.S. marshals. He'll draw up a list of 9 recommendations and submit the names to President Reagan, who will then make the appointment subject to congressional approval. Warner confirmed he is considering appointing a woman to one of the judgeships.
I feel a heavy responsibility to make a very careful evaluation to determine whether or not there are any females, women, that is, or minorities eligible for the positions of U.S. Attorney or federal judges.
The senator told a news conference from his Richmond office he's trying to get a female lawyer to consent to accept his recommendation, but she has so far declined because she'd have to take a cut in salary from her present occupation. Warner refused to identify the candidates he's been interviewing for the jobs out of respect for their privacy. The last Virginia senator to make judicial recommendations was our senior spokesman on Capitol Hill, Harry Byrd, Jr. He became embroiled in a controversy with President Carter after Carter chose a black Richmond judge, James Sheffield, who was not on Byrd's list. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The Wakefield Ruritan Club has sponsored the shad planking for 33 years now, and the crowd keeps growing. Well over 4,000 for this year's gathering in the woods, about an hour's drive from Richmond. People paid $7.50 for the privilege of hobnobbing with political celebrities, consuming mass quantities of alcoholic beverages, and of course the shad fish, nailed to wooden planks and baked all day long beside an open fire. On the grounds of the Wakefield Sportsman Club, mainly conservative white males paused only for a few minutes to listen as former Virginia Congressman Watkins Abbott gave a stirring speech on the virtues of Americanism. Absent from the flatbed truck full of dignitaries was Governor Dalton, who was still in the Far East on a trade tour. For those who want his job were there, pumping palms and smiling for the cameras.
I enjoy it. It's one of the premier, preeminent, non-political political events of the year, and any politician worth his salt wouldn't dare not show up because we talk about the folks that don't come.
You think it's important to the political scene?
Well, I think it's become a part of the political scene in Virginia.
How much support do you hope to pick up here?
I hope to get a majority.
Wakefield's delegate was proud of the crowd, which for a short time more than tripled his town's population.
That's great. The biggest I know we've ever had, and the people say that the food is great and the fellowship's good, so I don't know what else we could ask for. Watt just made a good talk and just a real great day.
You plan to have another one next year?
Well, I think we'll have another one next year.
They say there may be a shortage of shad next year, but there won't be a shortage of people who like to eat it. Politicians and Virginia good old boys alike. From Wakefield, Virginia, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The Commission adopted a new budget that includes almost $100 million in cuts to construction and reconstruction of Virginia's highways. The reasons are the same ones outlined last year when the Commission went to the Assembly for a tax hike. People aren't buying as much gas as they used to, and the cost of maintaining state roads and city streets hasn't stopped rising. On paper, the figures anticipate a decrease in state money from the fuel tax, licenses, and other sources. In addition, federal aid will be reduced for primary roadways. The net effect will be $52 million less money to work with in the next fiscal year. Only moderately sympathetic to the highway plight, the 1980 Assembly approved half of the tax increase sought by the Commission, 2 cents per gallon instead of 4. The Highway Department has already cut back its staff by 1,000 employees since 1979, but the new budget picture indicates additional layoffs appear inevitable. In contrast, the mainly federally funded interstate highway system is slated for a 3% increase in appropriations for the next year. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The governor's been out of the country for over 2 weeks, drumming up business for Virginia products in Far East markets. He has a lot of work waiting for him on his desk back at Capitol Square. He'll have to review a plan presented while he was away that would lay off up to 1,000 state employees in coming months, and preparations will be made for the General Assembly's return on Wednesday. Dalton was suffering from a mild case of jet lag and was anxious to get back to the governor's mansion for some rest, but he took time out at an airport conference room for some reporters' questions. He said he had more people with him on this trade mission than ever before.
At one time there in Tokyo, we had in the neighborhood of 50 people from Virginia. People selling coal and selling tobacco, selling peanuts, people working on industrial development, people working on port business.
That port business apparently took up much of the delegation's time as they tried to reassure foreign steel producers that coal will still come from Virginia, despite the strike and a bottled-up Hampton Roads.
Well, I told them what we had done at this session of the General Assembly insofar as the Portsmouth facility is concerned. I told them what Chessie did last August in adding the fourth pier. I told them that A.T. Massey was building a 15 million ton facility.
On a lighter note, Dalton said while attending services at a Baptist church in Taiwan, he met 2 missionaries from Richmond's Bon Air Baptist Church. And the Taiwanese minister said he was ordained at the Ginner Park Baptist Church, also in Richmond. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. One-third of the power produced in Virginia already comes from uranium. It's used as fuel in nuclear power plants. But there are no uranium mines in the state. The radioactive element has to be shipped in from the west. Delaware's Marline Uranium Corporation told the Virginia Coal and Energy Commission they want to step up exploration efforts in the state, particularly in Culpeper, Fauquier, Madison, Orange, and Pittsylvania counties. But the potential danger of health hazards, including cancer, has the industry defending itself and Virginians concerned for their safety.
So the chance of someone getting a fatal cancer from living within 1 mile would be roughly equivalent to the chance of dying in 1 year as a result of a commercial airline flight. In other words, when I flew down from New York to Richmond this morning, I had the same risk of being killed as I would if I'd lived next to within 1 mile of a uranium mine.
Increases in birth defects over a very large area. And we are seeing increases in children having bone cancer.
Virginians have recently experienced what even a non-radioactive chemical like ketone can do. We also currently have a problem with disposal of relatively short-lived radioactive materials. And now we are confronted with the possibility of uranium mining, which will pose a public health danger for an incredibly long period of time.
An Orange County official asked the commission to request a moratorium on uranium mining from Governor Dalton. But Marline already has leases on 50,000 acres of Virginia land and apparently feels it's ripe for mining. But whatever the outcome, don't look for any uranium shafts soon. If approval was granted today, regulations would prevent mining for at least 5 years. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The event, a fundraising reception for Marshall Coleman's campaign for governor. Budget strategist David Stockman put in an appearance at a $100 per couple dinner at a Monument Avenue home, then rushed to the hotel reception for brief remarks. He was scurrying around so he could be back in Washington in time for Reagan's speech. Stockman praised the proposal set forth by his boss and ridiculed the Democratic alternative plan, which he said has more warts than dimples. This fourth Reagan official to campaign in Virginia for Coleman said the eyes of the nation will be on Virginia this fall.
Because this election will be interpreted as a referendum on the Reagan administration, on the new philosophy and programs that we're bringing, on the direction and redirection of government that we're attempting to install.
David Stockman says his job in Washington of cutting the federal government is a tough one, but he says it's even tougher to raise enough money and support for a successful election campaign. That's why he came to Richmond tonight. At the John Marshall Hotel, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Hitler ordered music played as millions were marched to the slaughter in World War II concentration camps. Violin music opened the Yom HaShoah, or Days of Remembrance, for its commemoration in Richmond.
All burning, all consuming, was a calculated genocide unique in history because of its demonic frenzy to murder 6 million Jews only because they were Jews.
2 survivors of the Holocaust participated in a candle lighting ceremony.
None of us could picture ourselves taking part in the Holocaust of some 3 generations ago. But all of us need our own days of remembrance to be certain that the seed from which it grew shall find no place in our own hearts.
By proclamation, the governor urged synagogues and churches to remember together.
In suggesting that our citizens observe these days in their churches, synagogues, and through our other associations as a recurring reminder that such a horror must never be allowed to happen again. April 29th, 1981, San John N. Dalton, Governor.
Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Seems as soon as they agree on an idea, it's shot down and another one pops up from nowhere. The House Elections Committee first considered putting most of Chesterfield in the 4th Congressional District. The Democratic caucus was pleased, others were not.
To include Chesterfield County would be one of the most atrocious racist acts that this committee or any other committee could perform at a time when we're trying to bring our country into unity.
Ironically, unity was the name of that plan, deep sixth by voice vote. The committee finally settled on an amended version of an earlier plan and sent it to the floor. By a 57-37 vote, the delegates approved the plan drawn up by their colleagues in the Senate with minor amendments. If the scheme is implemented, the 3rd Congressional District will still include Richmond and Henrico, and for the first time, all of Chesterfield County. But even with Virginia approval, any plan still has to meet Justice Department requirements. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The law firm of McGuire, Woods & Battle occupies 10 floors of the Ross Building here on Main Street. Come February, the 2nd largest law firm in the southeastern U.S. will get a new partner.
We at McGuire, Woods & Battle consider ourselves fortunate and proud that the governor will join us.
Dalton's decision means he and his family won't be moving back to his hometown of Radford. Though he'll be living in Richmond, he says he'll maintain close ties with his farming and business interests. Under the state constitution, a Virginia governor cannot succeed himself, but can run again 4 years later. So I asked the governor about 1985.
I don't think that you can look in a crystal ball and say definitely what you're going to do the rest of your life, but I certainly expect to continue to practice law with this firm for the rest of my life, unless I change my mind. That's my current anticipation, yes.
On another subject, the governor commented on the coal strike in southwest Virginia. The first mass arrest has been reported in Lee County, 23 strikers charged with throwing rocks at police cars. Dalton has been in Washington and had not heard of the incident.
To the best of my knowledge, the people that have desired to work have been afforded the opportunity to work in Virginia, and that's what our right-to-work law guarantees them, and that's what we're going to continue to strive to enforce that law.
Dalton has maintained a heavier than normal concentration of state troopers in the coal fields. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. About 40,000 Virginians will die this year. Many of those left behind will look to their religion for comfort in their time of grief. In the Bible, book of 1 Corinthians, they'll find these words. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?
Students are amazed at the cost of the goods and services, when they look at what is involved in conducting even a simple funeral, they feel it's a tremendously expensive enterprise.
And it's extremely difficult to gauge just how expensive an enterprise it is until you're finally handed the bill, and then it's too late. Eyewitness News contacted each of the 26 Richmond area funeral homes by telephone and asked for an average price. Only 12 would even talk about costs. Under proposed Federal Trade Commission laws, funeral directors would have to answer price inquiries by telephone. The average cost quoted by those who would talk, $2,363.
Would you not say in the time of inflation we have now that having a funeral is indeed an expensive proposition?
Overall, I think because of the possibility of adverse public reaction, that the funeral directors themselves have kept the cost of funerals low in comparison to the progressive inflation rate.
Virginians will spend upwards of $100 million for funerals this year, but keep in mind all these numbers can be misleading because you can be buried free in certain cases, or you can spend as much money as you want on the service.
I think that the funeral directors themselves have a pretty clear picture of what they think is good for the public and what is constructive. This is not always what really is in the best public interest. I think like every enterprise, you need some constructive criticism and you need a lot of freedom of choice as to what you really want.
In most families, the funeral is the third largest expense they'll ever bear, next to a house and car. This week, we'll show you what you get for your money. Love, grief, respect, tradition all play a part in the selection of a funeral. We'll have more on that tomorrow on Part 2 of The Sting of Death. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. When a loved one dies, people feel alone, confused, uncertain about what to do. A professional nurse described the emotional state of someone who has just experienced the death of a spouse. Shock and disbelief, interspersed with bursts of unexpected feelings, including those of sadness, guilt, and anger. At such time, the bereaved suffer great difficulty in making decisions. Yet it's at this time when most people first have to make major financial decisions about the funeral.
Well, two things can happen. One, they can end up spending a tremendous amount of money unnecessarily, and for many families that might mean they would have to do without other things that were important, even education for children. Another thing is that it greatly intensifies the grief experience and might make it harder for them to adjust to the loss of the person who's died.
In addition, when they enter the funeral home to discuss the preparations, many people have been without sleep for long periods of time. They're often alone and very confused. All these factors put the consumer in an especially vulnerable position.
A person is going through a grief experience and they have to take care of funeral arrangements. What can happen when they're confronted with all these arrangements they have to make?
He's liable to operate from a sense of guilt, that if I don't spend a lot of money, people will think I didn't love my father. If I don't give the finest funeral, people will think I'm selfish, just trying to get all the money out of the will for myself. And guilt can result in making unwise and unnecessary decisions.
And those decisions have to be based on what knowledge he has available about funerals. There's no time to do comparative shopping. Choices have to be made, and they have to be made soon, like right now. So more often than not, the buyer is at the mercy of the funeral director.
The vast majority of everyone involved in funeral service are honest, and they strive towards satisfying the needs and wishes of the people that they serve. And it stands to reason that we're all human and no one's perfect. So we're going to make mistakes. Everybody does.
Eyewitness News caught a director making one of those mistakes, and you'll meet him in our next report. Tomorrow we'll take you behind the scenes of some local funeral homes on Part 3 of The Sting of Death. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. All Virginia funeral directors licensed today have to be trained in a mysterious process known as embalming.
The textbook definition of embalming is to preserve, sanitize, disinfect, and restore to a lifelike appearance a body. I think the most important thing that the embalming process does is sanitation, the alleviation of any harmful bacteria.
Most of us will enter a room like this someday, but not while we're alive. It's the preparation room where blood is replaced with water and formaldehyde to preserve the body for a short period of time. Embalming began during the Civil War when bodies had to be shipped long distances for burial. Its popularity today results largely from the public misconception that embalming will preserve the body indefinitely. Do you have to be embalmed? All of the 26 Richmond funeral homes telephoned by Eyewitness News said no. But when I visited one and said I was interested in arranging for a funeral, I got a different answer. Morton Billups of the Billups Funeral Home on Church Hill told me the health department requires embalming to protect the public from an epidemic or disease. We checked with the state health department and the board of funeral directors and embalmers. They said they know of no such law. Fact is, Virginia is one of 7 states in which embalming is not mandatory under any circumstances. As for protecting the public from epidemics, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta says we have yet to see any data indicating that there is a significant public health problem associated with unembalmed or ineffectively embalmed cadavers. Mr. Billups is out of town and unavailable for comment. Though it's not required, embalming is performed in almost all cases except for Orthodox Jewish services in which it is forbidden that the body is buried within 24 hours of death. If it weren't for the common custom of viewing the body before burial, embalming wouldn't even be recommended. Some have criticized the funeral industry for encouraging the perpetuation of this tradition in their consultations with the bereaved.
The choice is up to the family. I think if a funeral director starts telling people what they should do, then he is going from the role of an advisor to a dictator.
Embalming has become so popular, in fact, that funeral homes will perform it unless told not to. The Federal Trade Commission has proposed rules which would prohibit embalming without permission and prohibit misrepresentation of legal and public health requirements. Most of a funeral home's profit is made from the sale of a casket. Tomorrow we'll visit the funeral showroom on Part 4 of The Sting of Death. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. $1/4 of every dollar spent on funerals in Virginia goes towards merchandise. Funeral homes take pride in displaying their merchandise, especially their caskets, in lushly appointed areas called selection or showrooms. Usually they're fully carpeted with soft lights and eye-appealing colors. Why pay so much attention to this room? Because it's where funeral directors make most of their profit. When a funeral buyer is ushered into the showroom, he usually has a wide selection from which to make his choice. And over 100,000 styles and combinations can be custom ordered. Prices, they usually range from $200 to $4,000 per casket. Often survivors feel they have to buy an expensive coffin in the name of dignity and good taste.
I think a simple wooden coffin and a simple funeral can be very, very dignified, much more so than a gaudy one with an expensive-looking coffin with a special beauty rest mattress that will let you rise on the last day without backache. I don't think is either dignified or aesthetically pleasing.
The most frequent complaint cited by the Federal Trade Commission is funeral homes hiding their least expensive coffins, though some, such as Bliley's, display their $195 model beside their top-of-the-line $3,900 casket. Funeral directors also sell burial vaults, the boxes made of everything from asphalt to copper, in which the casket is placed during burial. Despite what some funeral homes say, there is no law which says you have to have a vault for burial, though most cemeteries require some type of outside container.
In some of the old cemeteries where a vault was not used or a wooden box was used, if you have a period of heavy rain and the ground gets soft, it's quite possible for someone to walk on that grave and have it cave in on them, or you could break a leg or an ankle.
This is the vault model display wall at Baliles, but the least expensive concrete model was on a separate table in the room, and its top was cracked and broken, not an attractive display. Although the family usually provides it, funeral homes do sell custom-tailored burial clothing for around $80. Charges for flowers usually range over $100. Also included on your funeral home bill will be charges for transportation, newspaper notices, long-distance calls, and any other services provided by the home. The cemetery, final resting place. Tomorrow on Part 5 of The Sting of Death, grave digging in the 80s. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The costs of a funeral don't end at the funeral home. Burial, or interment as it's now called, has always been big business. Few people are buried on their own property or in church cemeteries anymore. Most people, about 90%, have bought a cemetery plot in so-called traditional or memorial parks. A plot can cost from $75 to $500, but that's just for the space. Cemeteries charge over $200 for opening and closing the grave when needed. Other merchandise usually purchased includes grave markers and monuments on which you can easily spend $1,000. The prices charged by cemeteries have been rising even faster than those of funeral homes. Cemetery owners insist the services they provide are worth it.
It seems very tranquil and quiet here now, and I understand there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. What things do you have to take care of that the public never sees?
After the funeral concludes, we, of course, rearrange the flowers, close the grave, arrange the flowers again, take down the tent, level the lot up, and generally clean up. And we don't do anything then for 4 or 5 days until we come back and take the flowers off. And then we start a whole maintenance cycle. It takes a year to bring that lot back to a healthy state from having dug this big hole.
Of course, included in the plot purchase price is the cemetery's pledge to cut the grass and maintain the grave area indefinitely. After burial, the family begins settling up with all the people who have participated in the funeral process. Most people get help from a variety of sources. Social Security provides death benefits, usually up to about $250. Veterans are eligible for about the same amount, plus free burial in a national cemetery, though space there is rapidly running out. Life insurance can be used, as can burial insurance plans. Unions and fraternal organizations can help, and depending on how death occurred, workmen's compensation and governmental employees' benefits may also be available.
What about the family who needs to have a funeral but cannot afford a funeral? Where do they go?
We won't refuse to bury anyone because of financial means. As in any other business, if the finance is not critical, then we expect to be paid. If it's a situation where there are limited funds, then we will work with whatever is available.
So that's what you get with a traditional funeral. Tomorrow, in the final segment of The Sting of Death, we'll discuss some alternatives, including a rare visit to a Richmond crematory. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. There are several alternatives to the traditional funeral. One is becoming more popular almost daily. This is one of the 2 crematories in Central Virginia. It's a twin model installed last July at Forest Lawn Cemetery. It was built to handle the increasing demand for cremation. Though only 5% of all Richmonders choose cremation, the rate is 50% in California and 80% in England. During cremation, intense heat is applied for almost 3 hours. The body is reduced to 6 pounds of bone, which is pulverized into ash. Cremation, costing between $250 and $500, can save the funeral buyer 90% of the cost of the traditional funeral with casket burial. Contrary to popular belief, there is no law requiring a casket for cremation, and the Catholic Church no longer forbids it. Many people are now donating their bodies to MCV and other science schools for anatomical study. This eliminates the need for any body disposition charges. Most people are surprised to learn there are few laws governing funeral practice in America, though the Federal Trade Commission has been trying for years to set down strict regulations. In Virginia, the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers regulates the businesses.
We're very proud of the funeral profession that the standards are high and the complaints are very, very minimal.
Although the board rarely takes action against a funeral home, on Tuesday they suspended a Franklin County director's license for fraud in the conduct of his profession. Virginia, in requiring itemized statements for every funeral buyer, has taken the lead in enforcing proposed FTC rules before they're approved nationwide. Complaints against Richmond funeral homes at the Better Business Bureau are almost non-existent. In fact, 88% of all funeral buyers say they're very satisfied with director service. But critics say those figures are misleading because the public is uninformed about what is and is not required in the services.
Well, if you have very strong preferences, you should certainly tell your immediate family what it is that you want or don't want. Talk it over with them. Try to find out, say, if you have elderly parents, what they would really like so that you can feel that you're carrying out their wishes.
The Consumers Union suggests you should be aware of the death benefits available. Know what to expect when purchasing a funeral, what options are open, what goods and services can be rejected, and what questions to ask the undertaker. You should know the legal requirements for funerals and burial and have some idea of costs and funeral home pricing methods. Funeral buyers who are knowledgeable and informed will probably be able to avoid overspending. They may also be spared the resentment and anger some survivors experience when presented with unexpectedly high bills for a funeral and burial. No matter how you plan to handle the death experience, most experts strongly recommend you plan well in advance. The emotional pain of death is usually enough for us to bear without the additional sting of an unexpected funeral bill. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. A lobbyist is someone who acts on behalf of someone else to influence legislators to vote in their best interests. Under state law, a lobbyist must file financial disclosure statements with the Secretary of the Commonwealth.
Right. The reason for the law is the feeling that a tremendous amount of money is spent. Obviously, $1.2 million or close to it this year has been spent to influence the 140 members of the state legislature. That's a tremendous amount of money. And the idea behind the law is that the people have a right to know who spent the money and how much.
Of the 342 lobbyists on file, the top 5 spenders bought $200,000 worth of influence, though it's questionable whether they got their money's worth. Taking the prize for the most spent was the Northern Virginia Legislative Tour Committee, which shelled out $80,000 at the beginning of the session to actually show the lawmakers their problems. They were primarily concerned with transportation, economic development, and education. On the other end of the scale, 18 lobbyists spent the minimum $20, which is for registration.
I don't know why so much money is spent. I really don't. I think possibly more is spent than needs to be, but I don't think that's harmful to the system at all. I don't think it's corrupting anybody. In fact, I think most legislators will tell you when they go to a party, they very seldom even keep track of whose party it is. They just go, accept the free meal, and go back to work.
The final 1981 lobbying total won't be in until the end of the special redistricting session, and with expected court challenges, that might not come until the end of the year. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. With the Democratic State Convention just 3 weeks away, 2 Attorney General candidates are stressing the value of the uncommitted delegates. Shad Sullivan admits he's still behind in the number of delegates committed to a candidate, but claims 650 uncommitted delegates are either signed up or leaning toward a Sullivan vote. He hit his prime opponent hardest when he claimed support in Jerry Baliles' home territory of Henrico.
Our polling is now complete. We can say we have surpassed, with our committed delegates and the uncommitted delegates there, his total committed vote in that county.
I think that's wishful thinking. At the mass meetings, I think the vote was something like 57 to 11. The others were uncommitted. And of those uncommitted, I have some in this book, and there will be others added very shortly.
In reality, Baliles has 1,357 committed delegates to Solomon's 994. There are 1,143 uncommitted delegates up for grabs. Baliles would need less than 400 for the nomination, while Sullivan has to sway over 750. Money is bound to be a factor in the remaining weeks. So far, Baliles says he spent $94,000, while Solomon's campaign has used only $15,000. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Seems like plenty of rain when you have to walk through it, but when you have to grow with it, it's usually too little, too late. Heavy spring and summer cloudbursts usually result in runoffs, water leaving the fields before it has a chance to sink into the subsoil. The state has gone so long without good soaking rainfalls, sporadic thunderstorms can do more harm than good. The president of the Virginia Farm Bureau Federation says you can have too much of a good thing.
Too much rain with the soil being real soft where it's been plowed up for planting. We can get a lot of erosion. It can also keep us from getting into the fields to do the job that need to be done. And there are a lot of jobs that need to be done in the field this time of the year with machinery.
Ideally, farmers would like to have a good steady rain once a week in the spring and summer months.
So that we can have the soil dry to get in and plant, to get in and plow, to get in and cultivate our crops. So this is the type of rain we need, and we just hope we'll get them throughout the summer at the proper interval. We're just hard to please, I guess.
To get back to normal precipitation levels, farmers will need about an inch of rain per week for the months of June, July, and August. The chances of that happening are about the same as another 40 days and 40 nights. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Some of the regulations result from laws already passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor, so it's a bit late for the public to be here protesting those regulations. Speakers could only suggest ways the laws should be implemented. The most sweeping change will occur July 1st, when 18-year-olds will no longer be able to buy takeout beer. Representatives of the convenience and grocery stores are concerned about enforcement of that new law.
It is going to be a rather tedious time in that consumers of primarily off-premise beverages are going to be thrown into an economic situation where they're going to try probably harder in our outlets to obtain alcoholic beverages, and it's going to throw a load on our cashiers for a period of time.
The three-member commission unanimously approved the change. Several of the changes in liquor laws are designed to continue deregulation of the industry. Those who sell alcoholic products have long been complaining about the extensive paperwork required to run a business. Though most of the proposals were approved, the commission decided not to allow a doggy bag system for restaurant wine. Instead, they retained the law which says wine sold for on-premises consumption cannot be taken out of the building. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. This is Randy Davis. Bishop Walter Sullivan of the Richmond Catholic Diocese was in Williamsburg at a meeting when he heard that the pontiff had been shot.
We had just finished celebrating Mass for 80 priests and religious, and someone came in with the news right at the conclusion of Mass, and of course there was total shock and disbelief and just wonderment about everything. At that time we didn't know exactly how serious the injury was.
What went through your mind when you first heard it?
Well, real sadness. I just felt overwhelmed by it all. I felt emotionally drained. You almost felt like saying, not again, or, you know, world leader, and the disbelief that the Holy Father now would be the object of attack.
Governor Dalton is out of town and has not commented on the shooting, but Mayor Henry Marsh called it a despicable act which cannot escape our collective outrage. He asked all Richmonders to join him in praying for the quick and full recovery of this great humanitarian. Richmonders have been praying at special masses conducted at the Sacred Heart Cathedral and at St. Peter's Catholic Church on Gray Street. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. For as long as anyone can remember, inmate sentences could be cut in half for good behavior. But that doesn't necessarily mean the prisoners have been behaving well.
It's been very difficult to administer. It's been complicated and confusing to everyone, including the inmates. And in effect, almost everyone earns some amount of good conduct time, that is, time off for good behavior, even the worst behaved inmates.
So the Corrections Board has just put its stamp of approval on a new system passed by the General Assembly called Good Conduct Allowance. Inmates convicted after July 1st and those serving now who choose to can earn good time depending on their actual behavior. The best inmates will be classified exemplary and will earn 30 days off their sentences for each 30 days they serve.
The worst behaved inmates then will not be earning any good conduct time, contrary to the existing system. And consequently, those worst behaved inmates will be getting out of prison less soon than they would under the old system.
In effect, inmates have been given good time just for avoiding provable misbehavior. Beginning in July, they'll have to convince the authorities they deserve the time off. If the new system works as well as state officials hope it will, conditions in there should improve, and the prisoners who are released early to society should be more willing to straighten up. At the state penitentiary, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Hundreds of lunchtime onlookers gathered at Richmond's historic Shockoe Slip to watch the third annual cow chip toss for charity. What is a cow chip? Let's just say it's something Bessie no longer needs. There was music from the Freeman High School Band. WLAE radio morning man Jack Fitzgerald raised $2,500 in pledges from his audience, the money going to help fight Rye's syndrome. This guy definitely had a chip on his shoulder. Well-known and lesser-known personalities were on hand to let the chips fall where they may. This time, I'm not going to say it sure feels good. My toss was miserable, only 89 feet.
Formerly with a station down in Hopeless, right down here near the...
Not exactly an award-winning performance. The winning throw was performed by Joe Stevens of the Virginia Farm Bureau Network, 151 feet. Eric Estrada is no longer the king of the chips. Fortunately, the chip chuckers tossed north, so none of the stuff hit the fan. After it was all over, it was time to get the chips off the old block. As the crowd left, I could have sworn I heard some of them humming 3 chips in the fountain. Well, they were appreciative of the people here making their day a bit more chipper. So it's goodbye, Mr. Chips, for another year. Well? Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. It all began in a morning news conference called by Republican Attorney General Marshall Coleman to announce his position paper on the economy. Included is a commitment not to increase taxes if he's elected governor. Does this mean he'll oppose any efforts to hike taxes and veto any tax increases passed by the General Assembly?
Yes.
Even gas taxes?
Yes.
Any kind of tax increases?
I'm against it.
Even though Governor Dalton has seen fit to increase gasoline taxes, and even though the Highway Department will be asking for another hike next year, Coleman maintained he would not allow any new taxes. He stopped short, however, of guaranteeing a tax cut. That, he said, would be irresponsible. 30 minutes later, the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor and former chairman of the state Democratic Party was asked what he thought about Coleman's stand.
I personally think that that's an irresponsible promise, and I would be unwilling to join in a co-endorsement of that policy. However, I do, as all of us, will seek to find ways to fund necessary services without increasing taxes.
Davis had called reporters together to announce he has enough delegate support to assure a first ballot victory for the nomination at the state convention in 2 weeks. The Democrats' candidate for governor, Chuck Robb, is quoted as recognizing the possibility of another gas tax increase if he's elected. Both candidates Coleman and Robb say the economy is the most important issue Virginia's next governor will have to face. Candidate Robb will outline his specific proposals on Monday. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Congress is in recess until the 27th, and Bliley returned this week to Richmond, where he once served as mayor. He told Eyewitness News he's fully supportive of the Reagan budget cuts.
He's come up with a package. Many people criticize this or criticize that. But unless we deal with it as a package, we're going to lose the whole thing. And we've had unbalanced budgets for 49 or 50 years, and nations like people can't continue to live beyond their means, and that's what we've been doing. We've got to cut back.
Bliley acknowledged that what we have had has not worked.
The president has come up with a bold new plan. He believes, I believe, and many others who believe will work. And I think the public said in November, let's give it a chance.
And Bliley urged his fellow congressmen to get on with the business of turning the economy around.
Inflation is the worst enemy that we have, and it is hard on everyone, but it is particularly hard on the poor and on the elderly, many of whom are on fixed incomes, and it's brutal what it does to them. And one of the prime causes of inflation is increased government spending, and we've got to bring it under control. We've also got to reduce taxes, and when we reduce, when they talk about the president's tax cuts, we're not talking about cuts. We're only talking about reducing the amount of increase.
Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Democrat Chuck Robb has refused to participate in a formal debate with his opponent before the convention, so this appearance before the Virginia Retail Merchants Association was officially billed as a gubernatorial election forum. Coleman won the coin toss and gave a standard speech on fiscal conservatism and in praise of the Reagan administration. But the crowd at Phi Beta Kappa Hall was surprised at the manner in which candidate Robb took to the podium next. Recognizing the public's fuzzy perception of his stand on the issues and perhaps reacting to criticism about his long-windedness, Robb countered.
I'm going to take on as many of the controversial issues as I can think of.
Robb rattled off 24 key issues and followed each with his stand for or against, often with a brief explanation. Later, when the audience had a chance to question the two, a black man wondered why Coleman had supported Governor Dalton's veto of a bill which would have expanded Medicaid funding for abortion.
The worst case possibility, if my son rapes your daughter turns up pregnant, the kid is defective, and she wants to do something about it, what are you going to tell her? And if you can tell her to terminate a pregnancy, what about poor folks who can't afford it?
I made a statement at the time that the distinguished lieutenant governor was called upon to make a decision on the abortion bill and said that I didn't quarrel with what he had done and would not have done otherwise myself.
Any response from Lieutenant Governor Robb? No, I just might point out that I think that the same statement was made to the governor's veto of that you wouldn't quarrel with the veto either, for whatever it's worth. I'm not quite sure which side you're on.
It can be argued who was the winner of this 90-minute exchange, but it's certain the Robb campaign had the most to gain from his aggressive tackling of the controversies. The 500 people in the audience were mainly interested in the candidates' views on business, but they also seemed pleased the candidates have finally gotten down to the business of discussing specific issues. In Williamsburg, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. 5 people were killed in this Southside Richmond house 4 years ago. After a 2-year investigation, police arrested 2 suspects, Donald Worrell and Robert Lucas. With key testimony from a third man, Charles Perdue, the prosecution was able to convince the jury of their guilt, and the 2 were sent to prison. Now, 2 years after their trials, their attorney, David Boone, is seeking a new trial. Boone alleges state and federal prosecutors led witness Perdue to believe he could get 5 years taken off his 10-year prison sentence for an earlier arson conviction if he agreed to testify in the Green Acres trial.
You've heard evidence that 5 years time cut was mentioned, the fact that Mr. Perdue would not be charged by the federal people if, in fact, the state people were happy with him. Things of this sort certainly go to negotiations.
Boone told Circuit Judge Frank Wright his client's rights were violated because Perdue had falsely testified that there had been no negotiations. The Commonwealth's attorney says there were definitely no promises made in return for Perdue's testimony. Though at least 7 witnesses are testifying in this motion for a retrial, many are having a hard time remembering the specific conversations they had in 1979. The hearing will continue in the morning. Attorney Boone won't speculate on his chances for getting a new trial, but he says if he doesn't, he will go to the state Supreme Court. He remains convinced his clients are completely innocent of the Green Acres slayings. At Southside Circuit Court, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The 9-page proposal is really a continuing revision of standards which had been in effect since 1972. This latest set puts more emphasis on the effectiveness of classroom instruction. Among the more controversial sections the Board of Education has formulated are ones which create a special diploma for eligible handicapped seniors, begin career awareness planning in kindergarten, mandate community involvement in school improvement plans, limit the scope of the school day to teaching and learning activities, and set up selection and evaluation policies for all instructional materials. Some speakers criticize the standards for containing ambiguous language and diminishing the capability of local school boards to govern their own systems.
The state needs to follow the lead of the federal government and reduce the number and complexity of regulations in the area of public education. But school administrators and school board members across this state already saying that they spend too much time to address the state regulations and mandates, many of which involve an exercise in futility.
Several locality spokesmen seem to be saying, you give us the money and we'll follow your guidelines. The board has until July to make up its mind. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.